All right. Okay, so we're on now. So I'm Raul, and my guest here is Jon Strickland of American Hook Wrestling. Go ahead and say something so they can see you, John.
Hey guys, how's everybody doing?
All right. So today we want to talk about the art of catch wrestling. So a lot of times people like associate catch wrestling just with the rule set, right? You can either win by pin or submission, but um, I personally believe that it's a style. I mean, I don't. It's not just like by faith that I have this opinion. I mean, it's with my experience, even with John and working at Wigan, training there and stuff. I mean, you see the similarities, and so you can see that it's almost like archaeologists, right? Where it's like they make these connections with the evidence, right? And of older things that have been passed down, and you can see like that. The similarities between these lineages, like Wigan in England and American hook wrestling here in the United States, you can tell that it's like they almost overlap perfectly. So uh, that's that's to say that there is a style, and by saying a style, I mean there's kind of like a way of doing things with regards to wrestling. I mean, can I get your thoughts on that, John?
Oh, well, you said it all pretty much right there. I think it's like there's an art and there's a sport. It's just it would be no different than like jujitsu. You have an art of jujitsu and a sport of jujitsu. So, for example, learning jujitsu is the art. Learning to use jujitsu for self defense or to compete against other styles, that's learning the art. And then there's jujitsu tournaments, and that would be the sport aspect of excuse me of jujitsu. And I think this is similar to catch as catch can wrestling, where uh, there is an absolute art form. I had the conversation just the other day with a good guy, and I was saying to him, you know, the term itself, catch as catch can, is English. Now, has submission wrestling existed before then? Sure. Submission style of wrestling, and when I say that, it is a very vague and subjective, kind of generic term. But submission styles of wrestling we know were in ancient Greece and other ancient civilizations and cultures. Um, so it has submission wrestling has existed on it before, but the style, the art of catch as catch can, with the pinning and how they wrestle, the styles was developed over there, and then of course. Um, with America being, I guess, the new world, we're not even, 240, 250 years old. Uh, People came over here, some of the immigrants, and then they brought what they learned over in, I'd imagine, mostly from around the Wigan area, uh, and probably from some other areas too. I know that, like, with my main coach and his lineage, we know that Tom Connors brought it over to Farmer Burns, and one of my mentors now, and who's helped me quite a bit, Dick Cardinal. He learned from August Sepp, and August Sepp uh, originally was thought to have learned in Estonia, and maybe he did learn some in Estonia. But August Sepp also spent some time, we believe, in Wigan, um, and it was in England because I know August's son, and we still talk from time to time.
Yeah, no, but that's quite amazing though too. Yeah, you do have these people who are like from Estonia, even Finland and stuff, who
Yes,
actually either spent time in Wigan, but they also spent time either in the United States or Canada as well, right? And so there is like really like this, like you know that they learned at the source, or at least they trained at the source. So
for
even
sure.
so even their time that they in the United States and North America, they definitely influenced and brought kind of like the real style here. Right?
Yeah, and I think even when you think about it this way, you can even expand on we could expand on it in the sense that so when it came to the colonies with the United States, let's just say the our amateur wrestling style was catch as catch can up until I don't know the exact year when it stopped and it started splitting off into freestyle and or the folk style, and then obviously they decided to make it a wrestling style. Folk style became a uh, it's like wrestling with urgency. It's like playing football and only having 2 minute quarters versus 15-minute quarters, or uh, 2 quarters instead of 4 quarters, and it's all condensed, so it's become more of a you got to do this and you got to do it quick, or you don't have the time, obviously, to drag butt around, as my grandfather used to say. But so when we see that from an amateur standpoint, that in this country, that it was also called catch as catch can. They weren't allowed, when it started in the colleges, I think like Yale University or some of the Ivy League schools were the first ones to really get involved with that. They weren't hooking each other, but, I've seen some of that old stuff back in the day with, like, back in the era of like Robin Reed and stuff, and some of those guys, they might not have been like, blowing out knees with toe holds, but it was very rough compared, I think, to today's folk style. It didn't have quite the explosiveness because you didn't need it. Because of the rules, you could pace yourself and be more methodical in the way you attack. But I think when you look at that, I think there's been a big misconception that people can take. They can take Greco, freestyle, and jiu-jitsu or sambo and blend it and make their catch wrestling. Well, here's the thing, and this goes back to the art and sport. I've seen guys win catch wrestling tournaments who I would not say were technically catch wrestlers, but they won a catch wrestling tournament. Because I review somebody as a catch wrestler, someone who knows the art of catch wrestling. Winning the tournament is winning a tournament. Now, you got to consider back in the old days in the 20th century when the athletic shows and hooking was going on in America, they didn't have tournaments. You'd have wrestling shoots on the athletic shows. You'd have wrestling shoots in gyms. Well, with that being said, you're having those matches, and there were guys. I mean, Billy Wicks told me this. Dick Arnold's told me this. There were guys that were slam tough amateurs that could certainly beat guys. Some of the catch guys, they could get pinned if they're not careful. So it doesn't make them, like Dick said. He goes, "Oh, they won't really consider them hookers, but you had to be careful. They could pin you and win." Move the clock forward to this date, and I think if I took one of my guys who's been training for 6 months, he's got 6 months experience, I would not expect him to beat Jordan Burroughs in a catch match. And it doesn't mean Jordan Burroughs now a catch wrestler. It just means he won a catch match, a catch event. And he did it by using folk style wrestling. So if that makes sense,
Oh yeah. Well, at least for me, it makes total sense. And so, but I think, like, say if we, like, for someone who comes from some other like background, I mean, they have to like use the analogy according to whatever sport they come from. Like if it's a boxer, there's rules for boxing, but certain like regions might have different styles, or even languages. We talk about like different dialects and stuff. So yeah, so there's kind of like, so hopefully people understand that it doesn't mean like they say like just if you learned another language doesn't mean you're like a native speaker of it.
Well, it reminds me of the argument a few years ago with MMA. Is MMA a sport or is it a style? MMA is a sport, and then there's styles that make up, I think, that thing. But it's like no holds barred back in the days, and I don't really care about MMA anymore. But during the no holds barred era, there are a lot of boxers in the early days that were coming into the UFC, going into some of these different venues, and they wanted to compete. It doesn't make them they make them becoming an ultimate fighter is fine. Like, oh, he's a UFC champion, so he's an ultimate style fighter, or he's a no holds barred fighter. That's not an art style. That's not that no holds barred is a generic thing. Catch as catch can, and I think that's what we really hit the nail on the head here. Catch as catch can is not a generic term. It's not. It's not subjective. It's a specific style that you could have a great submission wrestler who could beat every catch as catch can wrestler on the planet, but that doesn't mean he's a catch can wrestler. Mm-hmm. No more than if I go beat the hell out of a judo guy tomorrow, it doesn't make me a judo practitioner. So,
yep. Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree. So hopefully people understand that. Whoever's listening, hopefully hopefully we made enough sense, so it's understandable. Yeah. So I think what we want to do is maybe we can try to do some kind of series. So maybe we can save some other questions for the next time. So I think maybe we'll go ahead and end it here, and then we'll see what questions we can get and from the viewers and stuff, and then we'll come back later.
Cool.
All right. Thanks, John.
All right. Thanks, Farrell. Take care.
All right, you too.